Hello, Bibs here. Today's episode is about Martin and Fabian's visit in Australia a few months ago, finding the sword, measure, controlling distance, and other pretty cool fencing topics. Some news is that Woody and I have released a Patreon. So every dollar that we get is going directly to this project, and we'll be able to keep on producing really, really cool, instructive fencing work to listen to, enjoy, and put into your own fencing. Hope you enjoy this episode and stay tuned for the next one.
Our microphone etiquette is awful. Sounds like I'm doing a morning breakfast show. Welcome to Habibi and Woody have tea in the morning.
Chin chin. Yeah. It's a good name. Maybe we should rename the podcast to that.
Yeah? Woody and Bibi have tea in the morning?
Yeah, and then
if you have suggestions for the name, we're not actually locked in, so just give us your suggestions and we'll have a listen. And if maybe for only one episode, we might call it your suggestion.
yeah, if you're our top tier Patreon subscriber, you get to name one episode.
You get to title an episode.
Yeah. Alrighty. So, what's news?
So, today is the 1st. We're recording on the 1st of November, which means that yesterday we did a workshop with Martin Fabian.
It was pretty cool.
It was very cool.
Yep, light came down. He's
on holiday. He didn't actually want to teach. We're sorry, Marty.
Yeah, I respect that he took some time out of his holiday. And I also really felt, I was like, yeah, bro just wants to have a holiday. I get it.
But let's talk about his fencing because his method is cool. So in episode 3, we talk about the rules of fencing quite extensively. And Marty is doing all the rules in his fencing.
Yep.
And I think, so our key sticking point where we were like, Marty, you're wrong, we're super smart, was pedagogically, he's not particularly interested in strong and weak.
Yeah, he assumes that if you do everything right, strong and weak happen for free, so you shouldn't think about it.
Yeah.
And practically, he is right.
Yeah.
And every single thing he does involves correct usage of strong and weak, and he doesn't think about it. So therefore, it is a perfectly fine way to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. My only quibble is just that in his understanding of the fencing, strong and weak doesn't feature, which is not the same as in his fencing. His fencing features strong and weak applied perfectly.
Yeah.
Like really, he's doing a very, very good job of it. He's not thinking about it, which is as it should be. He's advancing his strong, usually with a committed thrust.
Yeah, his strong comes forward while he comes forward. It's always graduating, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and he's usually using a higher position as well. So he's using very straight positions, but he literally talks about this of like sometimes you want to make your thrust more upright. So you want to be standing taller so that you can thrust over, where if you're shooting into a lower engagement, you can just thrust straight and it's not a big deal. Marty's thrusting over engagements. And so one of the things that's happening there is his strong is traveling through the weak and he's avoiding putting his sword in his opponent's strong. He doesn't think about it that way. It's not framed that way. The line he uses is actually from Lichtenauer, and it says that you should thrust over the hands. Lichtenauer, that's in Lichtenauer.
And the Italian boys, they do that too. Yeah. They talk about strong and weak as like a cool analysis and blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, it's just like if you kind of use their hands as a guide, then you're pretty much always going to win.
If your hand is a little higher than their hand and you're attacking...
Like while you're attacking?
While you're attacking. If your hand is a little higher than their hand and you're pushing your hand into the straight, direct line,
You win.
you will win.
Yep. And that's Gisliero, Caballero, Fabris, the Italian trio.
Yeah. This is literally how Fabris tells you to parry.
Yeah.
So we may have talked about this on the podcast before. Fabris tells you exactly how to parry. A lot of people's quibble with Fabris is that he doesn't have a simple parry. He does. His parry is push a thrust that you just know won't land because it pushes your forte forward.
Yeah.
And because you're pushing it towards your opponent's targets, it's usually also putting your weak in a fairly sensible position.
Right. Okay. And so this is something that I really liked about Marty Fab's approach is that you might try this and you might go, oh, but it doesn't work because I push like this and then they still can just blast through. And it's probably because you didn't push into the straight line.
Yeah.
You tracked the sword. And so
Yeah.
you moved your hand across. And this is, again, just for the sake of clear communication, saying that strong and weak doesn't exist. This is my one quibbles. Saying that it doesn't exist is unhelpful because the reason I can say why this you tracking your hand doesn't work. As you track across, you put your déballé in front of you and move your forte away from the straight line.
Yeah.
And their forte is coming
in the middle.
It's in the middle,
Yeah.
so it comes through the straight line, so the parry doesn't work. And so if you think that you're thrusting directly forward and then it's not protecting you, the chances are is that it wasn't directly forward.
Yeah.
And Marty Fab's approach is keep the pressure on. And what he's basically instructing you to do, and what we were finding when we were doing these drills, is that it's really clear when you're not going directly forward.
Yeah.
Because you actually can't keep the pressure on. First, you might miss. That's an indicator that you're not in the straight line. So
Yeah.
you're off target. B, you sort of land, but then you skip off. Again, your hands have moved. You're not on the straight line.
Yeah.
And so the point lands and the sword flexes means that you've gone into the straight line and you're continuing forward
Into the same line.
into the same line.
Yeah, if your point's hitting and skipping off, certainly sometimes it's because if it's happening in sparring, sometimes it's because your opponent has turned. But while you're doing this drill, coach is just sort of eating the thrust and the flex of the sword is working.
Yeah.
Which again, get a fucking flexible sword.
For the love of God.
But yeah, if coach is just eating that shot and it's skipping off, it's because you're deviating. It's not because, right? So it's because
Yeah.
you're going offline rather
Yeah.
than driving through the straight line.
Yeah.
Because if you were driving through the straight line, your hilt is in the same line as the point.
And I thought it was really cool that when we were doing the drill, it's like, okay, coach moves their sword away. Depending on if they move it up or they move it down or to the right or whatever, you find yourself naturally deviating off
Yeah.
into those directions. Like your hand really fucking wants to. And it doesn't matter how much you think you're going in a straight line.
Yeah. It's funny with the longsword as well. It was really tempting to track really hard when you're on the outside line.
Yeah.
Because we're normally rapier people, outside line is kind of the easiest one to do the straight line on because when you do a straight line, it shuts your line. But with
Yeah.
longsword, when you do the outside line, if you do a straight line, it does shut your line, but it's just a little physically more awkward to do a really straight line with
Both
longsword.
hands are there and you do feel like you're going to fucking die.
Yeah, I mean, so the big thing is that you need to not really be holding the sword when you're doing a
Yeah.
straight line. So you're essentially, even with longsword, that backhand needs to sort of not worry about following the interaction. You sort of shoot the thrust in third and you keep that hand there ready to mutate, but it's not doing anything. It's just following the interaction. It's not shoving the pommel under the arm.
No, yeah.
It's
you're
just
not
following.
trying to push with that.
You're essentially having your lead hand in the guard of third. Mm-hmm. Quillian's fucking up and down. You push it really straight forward so that your hand is directly in line with your own shoulder, and then you can turn your body so that your shoulders start to line up, whatever.
Yeah.
And that left hand is just along for the ride.
Yeah.
And then you hit, right? And the flex starts. We're now in the next tempo. Your afterblow matters, and now the tracking.
And now you track.
Is sweet.
Yeah.
And so this is one of the things I loved about what Marty was teaching was that like he's actually really directly interacting with how short tempos are and how any action that's not the direct action can put you out of time.
Mm-hmm.
And as like in afterblow systems, right? Like in afterblow rule sets, it's really, really important that you hit and then worry about the afterblow. And as long as you selected an attack at the right, as long as you've actually attacked at the right time, then you just need to make sure that your attack lands. So you're attacking, trust that you've attacked at the right time because you've decided that it's okay to attack now.
Mm-hmm.
So just fucking trust yourself.
Yeah.
And don't worry about if you get it wrong. Because if you get it wrong, guess what? You'll get parried or hit. Like the information will be readily apparent. So you need to go, like you need to fucking bet on yourself and go, I'm going to get this right. So that when you attack and you've for some reason decided it's fine to attack now, you're following the really straight line. You're doing nothing
But the attack.
And as soon as that attack lands, we're in the next tempo.
Yeah. And now it's all about defending yourself. And sure enough, it's reasonably easy to cover most afterblows.
Yeah, especially when your sword is bent on the other person.
Yeah. You go bang, straight line, that was really fast. And then it doesn't matter if they're coming high or low or whatever. You can just parry that shit.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good point that you make in terms of just attack because we're not dueling for real. It's all information and it's all data and it's all going to make you better. So if you attack and you get parried, then, I mean, you can assume a lot of things, but the chances are if you've attacked and you got parried, either you've decided to attack wrong, so you can watch that footage and go, was it my measure or was it my tempo?
Yeah.
Right? Did I attack when actually that was the wrong time? Did I attack when they had baited me with some cool measure thing? Whatever. Yep. And then if you watch the footage and those two things are right, then the chances are you've attacked and it's fucking, you pre-parried.
Yeah, your parry's in the right position. Your parry is in the right position so much of the time when you just did a direct attack.
Yeah.
Which is just to circle back to something I was saying before. Like, this is why Fabrus's parry of you can't counterattack them right now. That's a distance thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So you can't counterattack them is because this isn't going to land. Maybe it's just because you're shorter. So their attack can hit you. Right? Because they're taller than you. Your attack won't land in the tempo of them beginning the attack. It might when they arrive, right? Mm-hmm. So, and that's the key thing, and this is why Fabrus wants you to do this. Instead of parrying by doing some variation of a windscreen wiper, no matter how subtle, if you push your own direct thrust, it creates the little zone of safety for you. That's cool. And then, and this is what Fabrus says, because you've attacked, right? Because you've attacked, they now have to deal with the fact that they're receiving a counterattack, even if you know that it can't reach them yet. So if they're mid lunge, and they're lunge like I'm taller than most people, this is the way to disrupt me. I'm mid lunge, so you stab at me. And now I need to start doing things that aren't directly attack you anymore because I was already doing that and now that's not working because you've attacked second.
Yeah. Yeah. And like it's so clear with Longsword because Marty is just like, just attack. Like even if they attack you, you just attack. Your attack is better.
Yeah.
And because he's ignoring strong and weak, it's a little funny. It's created for him. His one thrust has actually become a two thrust system.
Yeah.
And Marty, have a one thrust system. It's good.
It's based.
It's really, really good.
Yeah.
And I say that it's a two thrust system because he's got, if people are higher than where you can go, you need a different thrust.
Yeah.
And so now he's got a 2 thrust system. But no, it's still just 1 thrust. The thing is that if you thrust and your sword is going above their hands, it means that your strong is always over their weak. And if they put their hands too high,
Yeah, your weak is going into their strong.
So he
So this is where
correctly-
he uses the shield howl.
the shield howl, and he correctly goes, okay, well, you're so high, I'm just going to put my strong high and keep my weak free, the deblet free. And so he just does that and then hit them. And you can't go low because you're already high.
Yeah, he's just not framing it that way, and I
doesn't-
do think that that's a mistake.
Yeah, because he does have 2 thrusts.
Yeah, he's got 2 thrusts.
They are, in fact, the same thrust.
Yeah,
Shield howl and his fucking whatever that is called.
it's
I don't know.
just a thrust in long point.
Yeah, it's just the long. It is all 1 thrust.
Yeah,
It's very cool in longsword because it's such a. It's very, very clear because it's kind of a short stick and it's a little bit more like my strong is so much of the sword. And rapier, actually, the extended second and the extended first are a little bit threatening.
Yeah.
And you sort of have to do it. You have to approach it a little differently, even though it's the same thing.
well, so it's actually to do with the hand protection. So with rapier, you can just you can just hang out in the extended position. So Fabris hanging out in those really long positions, or the diestro, like angulo recto, is doing the same thing. Where in longsword, all of your starting positions are more refused.
Because otherwise, you're just going to get your hands chopped off.
Otherwise, you just get your hands chopped off. So if you've got your hands sitting like directly in front of your chest in some sort of like low cron, that's quite a refused position. And so if someone attacks your hands, as long as you haven't fucked up your distance and you're too close, someone attacks your hands, you just go, cool, thanks for putting your deblet in the center, and now I can hit you.
Now I can hit you. Yeah. Yeah.
Where if you're hanging out in long point, which isn't a bad thing to do, those,
If someone goes to attack your hands,
now you have to deal with it.
well,
Well, you don't necessarily have to. You
it's
can just
the
attack them.
measure of your hands. So they go to attack your hands. If you were to lunge at them, they can withdraw and then do their own lunge.
Yeah.
And they pull your deblet into their strong, and then they just blast through your weak with their own Marty Fab based lunge.
Yeah, and this is where like the hand snipe is a snipe, right?
Yeah.
It's because they're doing it from extended hand distance, so you're not actually in lager yet.
Yeah.
Like you can't hit their body with a step, except you can hit their hands with a little step. So you chuck your little cut at their hands, they go, you're an idiot, and send a lunge at you. You lean back, collect, and rethrust.
Because they were never going to hit you in the first place. And it actually brings us really nicely to something that we have kind of just, we were like, oh, fuck, this is really important. And the Mighty Fab came and he's like, hey, this is really important.
Yeah, it was fun.
So one of the, there's a few different measures, right? And I really like Martin's take on
It's
it.
4 distance
There's
system.
4 distances. So we talk about lager and we've spoken about strata.
Yeah.
And we have actually already inherently known the other 2,
Yeah.
that it is really useful to categorize them because it helps you then further break down where your fencing breaks down.
Yeah.
If you're too close, it's now wrestling. So there's wrestling.
Yeah, there's a
distance.
grappling range where the rules of strata stop applying.
Yeah, and you are wrestling and grappling and hand-to-hand combat. And the thing is that we're doing sword swizzles, we're doing fencing.
Yeah.
And so if you want to go do grappling and whatever, that's cool, but that's not what we're talking about.
Yeah.
We're talking about fighting with swords
Also,
specifically.
interestingly, just to riff on that for a moment, if you want to do sword grapples, Aikido is not a bad place to look. Even though it's like shat on as one of the worst martial arts, and sort of rightfully so as an empty hand system.
Yeah, and I mean, I will defend that point in that a lot of Aikido is pretty shit, and I think
Look, we've been blessed by being around some people who are fucking amazing at Aikido and are therefore quite proficient martial artists, but that's not the norm.
that's not the norm. And those people that do it are very heavily weapons based, and they're kind of like very Fiore-esque in that it's just a parry stick. You have a short parry stick so you can wrestle somebody, and you have a crowbar.
Yeah, you can wrestle them into a position where now you can end them, and and that's sort of what's missing. So this is why I brought it up. So this is what's missing from Aikido is because you don't have a checkmate tool.
Yeah.
When you're doing it empty-handed.
Yeah.
And as soon as you have a stick, you have a checkmate tool. And
Yeah.
all of the stuff ports in because it's meant to be done with a sword at some stage.
Yeah, yeah. And like you just can't do the open-handed checkmate stuff if you don't understand fucking why it's there. And kind of like you can't do Fiore wrestling if you don't fucking play with the sword and then the dagger and understand, you just parry and then kill them.
Yeah. So like Levi is actually Levi Fontaine is quite a good example of someone who's doing Aikido-like stuff. I believe he's gotten some of it directly from Aikido. He also does like Kenjutsu stuff.
Yeah.
And he's doing those sorts of grapples. And they look really good.
They're very cool.
Anyway, the point being, the actual point being, if you want to do sword grappling, do a different martial art.
Yeah, go do or do historical fencing, whatever. But
understand that you're treating a separate skill set.
Well, and whoever you're learning from needs to acknowledge that there is the difference between Lager, Stretta, and grappling range.
Yeah,
and that you can't just fucking chuck Sverhau when you're going from, if someone's moving from Stretta to, like, you can chuck Sver from Lager to Stretta.
Yeah.
But if they're going Stretta to fucking wrestling, you can't do that anymore.
Yeah, and that's where you end up with all of these spheres where you're both getting hit. It's because it wasn't an intelligent choice.
Yeah, and one of you should have actually just been parrying that by grabbing their fucking arms or punching them in the face or whatever.
And so we're going to put a clip of Ardo taking people's swords.
And that's where that lives. That's where that really cool thing is. Yeah, I'm going to sphere. And also this is, I think where a lot of concussions are happening is that my sphere is like, if I land with it, you're copping it with the fucking forte.
You're hitting the forte, yeah.
And so you're just going boom. Whereas the debele, when you're that farther out, is skimming.
Yeah, well, because it's a bad lever, right?
Yeah.
It's the weak part of your sword in that it's not so good at transferring your strength.
Yeah.
Because you've got an unsecure lever.
Yeah, and so like it hits and it's going to bounce in your hands.
Yeah. And it just can't impart as much force. It goes faster, like it travels faster, so it's going to have a higher velocity, but it's not hitting with as much force. And
it's the thinnest part of the sword, so it's the lightest part of the sword.
And it doesn't need to hit hard because it's also the sharpest part of your sword. If you're doing it as a killing people martial art,
sure, yeah,
it's servicing its job perfectly.
But yeah, and so but that's why the mechanics, even if it's blunt, it's going to just not concuss quite as badly.
Because imparting blunt force was never its role.
Yeah,
that's kind of why I'm bringing up the how it interacts with sharps thing. It's like that was never what this was intended to do.
Yeah,
and when you look at longsword as a primarily sport-based activity, it still was never what this was meant to do.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, so your spheres don't belong in grappling range. Cool. Go do a martial art that acknowledges grappling range.
Yeah.
So you've got Lager, Stretta, grappling. Very, very cool. And then the fourth one, which is something that we were like, oh, fuck.
Yeah, literally this week we were like, right.
It's really important to talk about this. You can intrinsically know it, you can assume it, but out of measure is really important.
Yeah.
You need to know when you are out of measure. And because it's a huge fucking band of infinity until the point in which you are no longer out of measure. And so you can make it binary.
Yeah.
You can either be in
or out.
Yeah. And there is a specific point.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know where... I can't be quite so specific about the delineation point where we go from Stretta to grappling distance. I sort of know intuitively, but I can't tell you on the podcast today exactly where that line crosses from we're in Stretta to grappling is actively an excellent idea now.
I mean, it's kind of like if you can grab them with your hands.
It's if you can grab them with your hands and you can't hit
I don't know. I think it's just if you can grab them with your hands.
Yeah, without reaching for it. It's
Yeah,
just like your hands
If
on
your
them.
hand's there, so we're in grappling range because we can shake hands.
Yeah.
So it's like
Yeah,
if
if the two of us can shake hands, then we're in grappling range.
Yeah.
Is not a bad place to look at it, and that's where a lot of the conclusions are happening in the Distrezor system. So if you watch Tom play,
Yeah.
he's putting his hands into people's cups all the time.
Yep.
So is Levi.
Yep. And there's grappling. Nice, perfect grappling range.
So that's where grappling can start, and we can be in Shredder and be a decent bit out of that. Mm-hmm. Cool. So now we have our closest delineation point.
Yep.
And then out of measure, the delineation point is literally if they lunge with their longest fucking attack, they can't hit you. And you have some systems like Marcelli that really relies on an advanced lunge. Okay. I assume I'm basing this off what other people have told me about Marcelli. So if that's
Read the fucking book.
but at me. What was I saying?
Out of
Oh,
measure,
so
actually, yep.
so the advance can take you into lager and then the lunge lands,
Yep.
right? But that's a tempo being spent to hit lager,
Yeah.
and then the lunge has to happen, right? So we were out of measure, or we might have been out of measure. And if you're in lager and you're doing an advanced lunge, it's because you're relying on your opponent running away.
Yeah. This is where I wanted to... Oh, this is actually where this has come from. So, if you're doing longsword and you don't have your hand protection and you're on long point, right?
Yeah.
If you begin from out of measure, right, with both of you have withdrawn hands,
Yeah.
both out of measure, and maybe we can have a video showing this idea. If you both lunge at each other and you both can't hit each other, cool, we are just out of measure. But if one of you extends your hands, right, then the chances are, like if you've gone to the closest possible point in which both of you can't hit each other, only just, even on your furthest lane, if one of you extends your hand, the other person can hit that now.
Yeah.
So the hands, by being in long point, have entered into a measure in which they can be sniped.
Yeah.
But it's a trap because if you just move your hands back, you're
back out of measure.
you're back out of measure. All of you is back out of measure. Only your hands are in measure. So if somebody lunges to hit those hands,
Yeah.
then
what happens is I bring myself all the way into your measure, but you're able to stay out of measure.
I stay out of measure because I haven't moved forward.
Yeah.
But you have stepped forward, so you are now in measure.
Yeah.
And so I can just do the sick Marty Fab. I pull my hands back, I regain the strong, and then I lunge forward.
Yeah.
And because you're forward, I'm just winning now.
Yeah. And as long as you're having you're out of measure because this is happening in tempo.
Yeah.
So that's a really important thing to understand. If I finish my lunge and you've done nothing with that tempo, now I actually just have securely gained probably Strata.
Yeah. Well, actually, you've securely
I'm still
gained
lager.
lager.
Yeah, because I'm at the lean point.
Yeah. And this is cool though, because like if I've just let you do that and I've withdrawn my hands and you are strong on, and this is why Marty wants you to stay firm on the straight line, continue forward. So he's lunged, you've done nothing except retreat your hands. Well, he's going to just keep coming forward.
Yeah.
And like, good luck trying to take a strong back without retreating more. Like at that point, it's going to be hard to really send in your own thrust in a way that isn't a real attack that can't be parried.
Yeah.
And if you do, then Marty Fabs will parry. And as he's stepping into Strata,
This is
he's
where he
lands
house.
the sphere.
Yeah. Yeah, and then here the sphere is really fucking cool because it's actually a short bridging action because it's taking you from Lager to Strata.
Yeah.
On the offense.
Yeah, and it's put you fully in obedience. And like,
Oh, so this is another thing that we wanted to talk about actually. So that's fucking awesome. So Fabris has this idea of obedience. And like finding the sword is a condition where your sword has to pass through my forte to hit me. Obedience is a condition where your opponent can either parry or be hit.
There is no secret third option.
No.
And if you are finding that fucking old mate has a secret third option, they weren't in obedience.
Yeah, this is the key thing. So sometimes you'll put yourself psychologically into obedience, and it's because you're not paying attention to the rules of fencing. You're paying attention to what your opponent's doing, and this can be quite disruptive. And then you're like,
You're your own worst enemy.
I've got to do stuff, and this is another thing that Martin talked about in his workshop, which is that your worst enemy in the competition is you. And as long as you focus on, in his framework, as long as you focus on sitting, like preparing a thrust and making sure you're at the right distance to hit your thrusts.
It doesn't matter what they do.
It really doesn't matter what they do, because they give you a tempo and then you can actually just send it. And in our framework, as long as you're not sending it into their forte, that system works.
Yeah, and if you are going to send it into their forte, just send it, but in a way that's not their forte. Essentially, just pick Shilhao instead of
the normal straight thrust. Yeah.
Which the Shilhao is the normal straight thrust.
Yeah. So the Shilhao is really cool because it just lags the double A entry, but it doesn't delay the entry of your forte at all. So it's just like
the thrust is the thrust.
The forte is coming in, and then the double A just gets to drop on through once you've got that position. But you're not waiting for it. You're just snapping the thrust over. You're just coming from a descending position rather than from a direct position.
The analogy that really helped me was fishing. You throw the rod, and the line goes whoosh, and it flicks, and like you just go boom in with your forte, and then your double A just goes, oh, that's for free.
Yeah.
Yep.
I have forgotten what I was saying. Obedience.
Obedience.
So with obedience, there isn't that secret third option. It's they can parry or lose. They can run away is maybe the closest you have to a secret third option, but then they're not squarely in obedience.
So the cool thing about obedience is that maybe they can run away, but it's the reason that it's like a measurable thing.
Condition.
Thank you. A measurable condition is because it requires correct measure and correct tempo and correct sword interaction.
Yeah.
And I guess what we're saying is that if you can swizzle out of it, it probably means that you might have been too close. So like if someone throws a sphere, if you can parry that, then you were probably in the wrong measure.
Yeah.
Or like in the wrong fucking tempo, you know? You had the straight line and then you decided to leave it to cut around. Yeah. Which is completely the wrong measure and tempo to be doing that. Yeah. If you've got the straight line and you aren't being stopped, why would you stop? Yeah. And if you do continue, your opponent is in obedience because they have to parry. Yeah. And then or they get hit. And this is not to say that actually obedience is necessarily a bad thing.
It's not a win condition. It's just a condition of fencing.
Yes, because in this earlier example of you've put your hands out, I lunge, right? Yeah. I retreat my hands. Yeah. I then throw my thrust at you as you're going into... So you've gone into Liger, and then I thrust at you as you're stepping into Strata. Let's say it's Marty Fab doing this, because he literally did this in the workshop. It was very cool. He has to parry. Yeah. Right? But it's sort of his sphere.
Yeah, because he's defeating your attack in a way where he's retaking the initiative. Yeah. And this is where you have, this is actually cool. This is where you have Indes interacting directly with strong weak. So because the attack is now, because he's using his strong, by bringing his strong into the interaction, he's freeing his weak at the same time. And that's that is the Indes interaction.
Yeah.
So, we don't have Danzig here. It's a bit of a shame. What's the line? It's Voron Narc and then strong and weak Indes remember herein or something like that.
Yeah.
And Indes is directly related here
With strong and weak.
with strong and weak.
Yeah.
And so Marty's momentarily put in Narc has to parry, right? And in parrying is simultaneously freeing his weak and is now retaking the 4. That's kind of the function and point of Indes there.
Yep. Now, he might be counter-thrusted correctly and he actually can't deal with that.
Yeah.
But chances are, if he's gone in and then someone else has tried to go now
Yeah.
by parrying,
so-
your double A is free to then re-attack as you've stepped in.
Yeah, and so this becomes it's actually like the perfect example of how to optimally take yourself out of obedience.
Yeah.
Right, so you're forced to parry, and this is why Fabra says to counter thrust, even when you're just parrying. Your simple parry is still a thrust, is because you want to be freeing the offensive part of your tool.
Yeah.
So that every time you're put on the defense or every time you're put into the narc, that paradigm is quite useful for understanding this flip of initiative. You're using your strong to bring you back into the offensive position.
Yeah. So I've gone Vor.
Yeah.
You've counterattacked, right?
Yeah. Well, so if you thrust at me,
Right,
and I thrust back, that is Indes. I'm flipping.
You're flipping it. Yeah.
Right. So I'm by putting my strong through where your point is traveling, and having my point come towards your face.
My point is free now. It was controlled. It's free. I have initiative.
Right. And
so this is, again, it's a condition. Your measure also needs to be correct. Yeah. Because this kind of thing that we're talking about, where someone lunges and then the other person counter lunges, right, will have two outcomes. If somebody lunges, so both fences start in Lager, where with one step, one person steps and they can touch, and this person steps and they can touch. Cool. So if this person lunges, if this person correctly counter thrusts, they actually just hit because this person stepped into Strata. So this person doesn't need to step.
Yeah.
So boom, they hit.
Yeah. They can just find and hit in a single tempo.
Yeah. So it's not really obedience here.
No.
Because
they're not required to parry.
Yeah, and you can't actually parry that because you've stepped into Strata and there's basically just one... The only way that they can parry is if they haven't taken the most direct line to counter thrust you. If this person can't, if they've gone like off to the hands or something and you can sneak it in, they deviated.
Yeah.
But if everything was true and correct, this person went straight line, this person retook the straight line. Sorry, you stepped into the Strata and now you're dead.
Yeah.
But if we're now out of measure and this person steps into Lager and this person counter thrusts, they've also, because we need to remember that you've stepped into Lager, I still need to step to hit you.
Yeah.
So if I step also into Lager, this person now has one tempo to react. Does that make sense? Yeah. I've gone boom, you've counter thrusted, and I can do something about that.
Yeah.
And so obedience is really only working in this measure.
Yeah, and you can't be in obedience out of measure.
and you can't be in obedience out of measure. So it is a condition. If you're putting somebody in obedience, you're probably in lager.
Yeah.
You might be able to do it in strata, but
Well, I sort of find that the chief place that I actually engage with obedience is in the crossing from lager to strata.
yes.
So when I'm taking strata, my opponent is usually in obedience.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's cool is when you understand how to do this, your attacks from lager, they don't need to have like a sense of deliverance to hit. It's good if you can, obviously. If you can win. But like,
They just need to advance forward on the line.
yeah, and so by doing so, I'm arriving at strata in a situation where you have to parry,
Yeah.
right? Which is fucking awesome, because if you're forced to parry at strata, I'm probably going to win the next tempo.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to win on the next tempo.
On that. Yeah. Yeah.
Because as we've said before, like you can't win blade interactions at strata. You can try.
You can try. You can try, but like, so the very cool thing about strata is that it is so. If you're not winning on strata, it's probably because you didn't take the most direct attack.
Yeah.
And it's your own fault if you think that the most direct attack is always the head or always the chest.
Yeah.
Sometimes the most direct attack is you hit the arm. Sometimes the most direct attack is the leg. It doesn't fucking matter. There is a
most direct attack.
and that's gonna just be a short little fucking bop.
Yeah. Yeah, you just want to find the shortest line from your point to their body.
Yeah. And if you can't do that, then it probably means that the other person has the strong
Yeah.
and they have the line. And if you're like, oh, well, I've got no short line attack.
Leave.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're in training, you can be like, well, hang on, do you? And chances are
that they do.
that I can just hit you in the arm right there.
Yeah. Occasionally you also find that actually both of you have found each other's swords and neither of you has a direct line. But that's pretty rare. That's sort of like a 5% edge case.
Well, I would say actually it's maybe better to understand it as both of you have free swords.
That's an interesting argument.
Because if you've got a lefty and a righty and you're both chambered up here, you actually can't really, you might be able to try, but chances are both of you can stab each other.
Yeah. Here, by the way, if you're just listening, is a retracted like hip firing position.
Hip firing position, yeah. But in that kind of retracted guard, lefty and righty, and both of your hands are extended. Like, you know what I mean? If your sword is free, no good in strata, because this is where doubles exist. I guess is what I'm trying to say. If you're somebody that believes that doubles are always happening and that there's no way to stop a double, it just probably means that every time you've got into strata, you've done nothing to constrain their position, and so of course they can double you.
Yeah, or you're attempting to constrain their position when you've already arrived at strata.
Yeah, and you should just be hitting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, exactly. So you should just be hitting, or you should be leaving strata.
Yeah.
Like, strata is not the place to develop a cool blade position.
No.
That had to happen as you were crossing to strata or while you were in lager.
Yeah.
Like, that has to happen at that transitory period, because when you've arrived at strata, if you're now trying to win your cool blade position, that is the tempo that they can use to hit you with a direct attack.
It actually might be a really cool thing to try if you do some sort of like, I don't know what the word would be, like constrained sparring. But the constraint is I'm going to do my best to just get into strata with a free sword.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to just stab them. And you just try and, like, it's not to double.
Yeah.
It's just that your goal is to get into strata with a free sword. And as soon as you can get there, just immediately stab the closest target. Don't worry about defending yourself.
Yeah.
It might be very, very cool to try, because I reckon that what's going to happen is at worst you'll double, and most times you'll win.
Can we address something? So our last podcast episode is maybe going to be available audio only on Patreon.
Yeah.
But basically there is an episode that's not getting released on YouTube.
Yeah, look.
Because we lost half the footage.
It was a terrible technical disaster, so we're turning it into Patreon only
Yeah,
content.
we also got slightly too drunk in like it just became slightly incoherent. It's fine.
We've got tea now. It's fine. We're a breakfast show.
We're a breakfast show. Bibs and Woody in the morning. What I was going to say is what that means is we haven't talked about Oktoberfest on the podcast.
Ah, right. Okay. Cool.
So Oktoberfest is the biggest comp in Australia on our regular calendar, and it's run by Daniel Pope and Scholar Vic.
Yep.
And there was a reason I was bringing it up.
To do with people getting too close and just having free swords and stuff.
Oh yeah, it's to do with doubling.
Yeah.
So this is aside from like some safety concerns, which
I mean, look, we go into that in podcast 4 and it's all...
well, we don't because that's not being released. That's the point of why I'm talking about it.
Well, yeah, they got to subscribe to Patreon.
You got to subscribe to Patreon if you want
to. Give them a reason. Don't subscribe it now.
Look, there are some safety concerns, but in sort of the formatting of the competition, my least favorite thing actually is that doubling is considered so much worse than being hit that on the seedings on scorecard, I was seeded after pools as like 6th.
Yeah.
Even though I had by far the least hits against me.
Yeah.
I just had more doubles than the guys ahead of me.
Only by a couple as well.
No, by 0.7. By 0.7, I had more doubles. I don't know how that calculates.
Yeah.
So I had 2 doubles.
Yeah.
And those were the points scored against me.
Yeah.
So I had a points against category, 2 points. Next was 4, which was marked, and that was all in one match. And then the next was like 12.
Yeah, points against. And they
just points against.
Yeah, so that's like losing.
Yeah, fully losing the exchange.
Is better than doubling.
Which is insane.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I think there is a culture of thinking that doubling is the worst thing that can happen.
But we haven't understood doubling for a really long time.
And so people think, I think the reason people think that it's bad is because it's a bit ugly.
Yeah.
Because you're sort of going, oh, 2 dead idiots. Both of you have fucked up. Yeah. But actually, a lot of the time, one person has fucked up and one person is engaging with the rules.
Yeah, like one person actually can be operating really correctly, which is my game is to step in to Stredder with the free sword and ice you in the closest target.
Because that's what gets me points. And that's not a bad rule set. It's fine.
It's actually cool. Like if that's your plan, that's a great plan and it interacts with everything correctly because it means that you know where you are.
Yeah.
And it means that you know when your sword is free.
Yeah.
And you can't get close enough that you can just hit somebody unless you're timing somebody.
Yeah.
And so you know your tempos and you have to get those 3 right. I mean, the sword, strong and weak is actually kind of, you could just have a fully retracted guard and you could possibly do this whole thing with just that, but it's one avenue.
I think that's sort of the Rob Childs method is keep the sword. He sort of keeps it in sort of knee height and...
Yeah. And I'm sure there's some really cool stuff, like just theory crafting it now. You know, you could probably realize that people want to follow your sword if you wiggle.
Yeah.
And if you wiggle the other hand, looking at you, Rob Childs, you can probably confuse them and then you just ice them because they're confused about what to do. But that person doing that isn't a dead idiot. They are following a very clear action plan that engages with real good fencing.
Yeah.
And I think...
Oh, look, let's not gas that person up too much because they're still getting stabbed.
I want
But
to... Yeah.
What I'm sort of like... What I'm driving at is that them correctly, like them doing a good attempt at putting together an offensive game plan, which is what you've just spent the last few minutes describing.
Yeah.
That's and then fucking it up, and so they get hit. That's not the worst thing to happen in fencing. The worst thing to happen in fencing is their opponent also has a good game plan and just ices them before they can do anything akin to their game plan. Like, if you're like, getting hit cleanly is the worst thing to happen in fencing.
Right, I forgot
You
that we're
just-
still having a personal gripe about where you placed.
Absolutely, I am still complaining. This is still a rant.
Yeah, you getting hit cleanly is the worst thing because your plan was completely foiled.
Yeah. And under most rule sets as well, that's how you lose matches. It's because your plan was foiled so completely that they just have a clean points advantage.
Yeah. Yep.
Right? And if you're fighting someone for your honor, you dying is the worst outcome.
Okay, so this is the doubles thing. You dying is the worst outcome. So we're going to create a rule set that really punishes
Both of you for dying.
anybody from dying, right? But
Yeah.
like if you rely entirely on the other person trying to preserve themselves, right? That's what we're trying to punish here, is that I'm relying on you to have self-preservation. I'm going to game the rules.
Yeah.
But this is my counter argument, is that doubles are only a 100% guaranteed. If someone's just trying to double you, they will always get it. That only exists if you don't know where you are.
Yeah. If you just don't have your measure locked down.
If it's not locked down,
If you don't know how to be out of measure, you don't know how to be at lager, and you don't know when you're arriving at Shredder.
Yep.
That's when doubles happen and everyone's like, oh, they just doubled. Every time I double, it's because I've arrived at Shredder. Basically because I'm being a dickhead. That's why I got hit at Oktoberfest in the doubles. It was because I am putting myself at Shredder without properly adhering to the rules of fencing. Because I'm being arrogant and thinking that my opponent won't be able to hit me.
And you're playing that game plan of I have a free sword and I'm in Shredder, and then they attack you.
Yeah.
And the thing is that they just attack you,
Yeah.
and they didn't really pay attention to the fact that your sword is free.
Yeah.
And this is kind of what I want to get at, is that if you believe that doubles are impossible, I bet you could have found an attack. If you watch footage, there is an attack that stopped the double from happening.
Yeah.
And it is faster, like it can be a one-tempo thing. It'll be faster than their parry, and it will stop the attack from landing on you as a double.
Just to circle round, this is really evident in Martin Fabian's method.
Yes. Yes.
His method doesn't consistently double because he's really aware of where he is in distance. He breaks it down into the 4 distances of out, wide, narrow, grappling. And because he knows where he is in space, he can just deploy the attack.
Yep.
And then the attack keeps him secure because he ends up putting his strong in front of him, fully extended. And now the strong is doing its work. And he doesn't, again, he's not pedagogically engaging with strong and weak, but it's completely self-evident in his fencing. And literally every time he's winning a fencing engagement, it's because his strong is fully presented forward.
And actually, we should talk about this because I really like that it's only as a point of analysis that I kind of disagree with his idea that strong and weak don't matter.
Yeah.
In terms of fencing,
especially in terms of teaching fences.
Like and just like the practical way that you do your fencing.
Yeah.
Why the fuck are you thinking about strong and weak? Why are you not just paying attention to fucking measure and your, fucking senses, your spidey senses? Like,
Yeah.
don't be thinking about analytical stuff. Just dodge.
Yeah, you don't need it.
And so, like, I really love his.
Yeah, and he's making tactical choices that have already. His tactical choices bring him into good, strong, and weak positions rather than him trying to get good and strong and weak positions as a tactic.
Yeah.
Right? So he's seeing the opportunity to send the direct thrust. Because he's sending the direct thrust along the straight line, that is having the consequence of putting his strong directly into the interaction. That's about how you should think about it.
Yeah, like he's never analyzing it. Like he's always got it.
Yeah.
He's always strong.
He has it literally every time.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't need more than that. Like you should be able to feel the midpoint of your sword and the point of your sword, as in the tip, as easily as you know where your ankles are, you know where your knees are, you know where your hips are. You just know.
You just know.
You're not thinking about, unless you're like doing some fucking, what's going on with my knee because maybe it's sore. You're not thinking about your knees when you send a lunge, right?
You're sending the lunge.
You're sending the lunge. You're not thinking about everything that your body's doing.
Yeah.
That's for practicing your lunge at home.
Yeah. And that's like with finding the sword, right? It's all this strong, weak stuff, blah, blah, blah. It's study. It's practice at home so that it becomes part of your...
So that you understand it.
Yeah, so it's just in you now.
Yeah.
Um,
And then the most important thing becomes, where are you in space? Your measure has to be correct.
Yep. And, okay, so...
And I think most of our listeners would benefit from ignoring strata, ignoring grappling distance, and focusing on being either the fuck out of measure or in lager.
Yeah.
And then strata will also just happen.
It just happens because sometimes both of you lunge forward.
Yeah.
But if you're only lunging forward from I'm the fuck out of measure or, okay, I am in lager now, and then they lunge and whatever, like, oh, fuck, I'm just in strata now. It just appears.
Yeah.
Very, very consistently, actually.
Yeah. I mean, I think that a really valid longsword game plan, or any fencing game plan, but we sort of have been talking about longsword.
Yeah.
I think a really valid longsword game plan is to completely dispense with parrying, which is not to say dispense with defending yourself, but you just sort of keep your sword central and you can retract it so that it's sort of close to your chest, or you can have it fully extended.
Yeah. So Marty's game plan is a very valid game plan.
Super valid game plan. But the point being, sometimes you need to defend yourself and you can't see your direct line. So leave distance.
Yeah, just get out of distance. Because, and this is like why
Or they just have the jump on you and it's too late to send your straight thrust.
But this is why I like Marty's approach, even though he's ignoring strong and weak.
Yeah.
Is that he's like, I mean, he's sometimes you just don't think you can get the straight line in.
Yeah.
So I just walk backwards a little bit and wait.
Yeah.
So he's saying sometimes it's no good because they're fully won. So just break and wait for them to re-enter. And chances are, as they're walking in, they're doing some dumb shit, and you can just go again.
Yeah. And if you pull distance, if you start pulling out of distance and they've been attacking, and he was saying this yesterday, their attack peters out most of the time. Some really good fencers can continue a running attack in a way that isn't a bull rushing you down. That's pretty fucking rare. Most of the time, the attack peters out.
Yeah.
And
it just doesn't have impetus anymore. And I go back to, it's Fabris, right? That the attack is in tempo if it lands before the parry can come on.
Yeah.
And so being able to have explosive power based, because then when everything is good, you just get to go boom very quickly.
Yeah.
So that's not very much time to parry.
Yeah.
Parry. But after you've done your first explosion, the second explosion is slower. Because that's how your fucking biomechanics work.
Yeah.
You might be God and you might fucking have enormous legs, so your second explosion is still really good, but it's not as good as the first, and so there's more time to get a better parry.
Yeah.
And by the third, most of us are completely done.
And
the
also,
attack is fully spent.
well, also, if you attack me with your big long attack and I pull distance, chances are if you renew the attack, you're doing it out of tempo.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's really what's going on.
Yeah.
Most of the time.
Right.
Is that now it's not a valid attack because I can just parry.
Yeah.
And in this case, and this is what you said before, parry includes, or sort of directly means, thrust into it and allow your forte to clean up the path. There's an old saying from our friend Martin Kraskov put us onto this. There's a fucking kendo idea that only one sword can occupy the center.
I love that.
And it's like, it's one of those things where it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, the sky blue, but also, yeah, only one sword can occupy the center, and it's usually the sword that goes in second.
Yeah. One sword goes in. That's Vor.
Yeah,
Narc can go in too. But
Yeah.
Indes means that while you're going in, you free your own
you're freeing your
devil egg.
weak, yeah.
Free the weak. And the weak is scary. Now that can do in the next tempo occupy the center again.
yeah, or ideally in the tempo.
Yeah, in the yeah.
Yeah. I thought it was really funny. So Martin Fabian has this. He calls it a one thrust. The one thrust philosophy.
Yeah. Based.
It was really funny. It was very funny to me because Capoferro talks about this idea that there is just one straight line.
Yeah.
And that...
Gisliero does it too.
Yeah. and it's very funny because it's like, you have all of these other lines of attack, but they're just worse than the straight line. And Marty talked about this idea of like, you basically never need a shortened thrust.
Yeah.
And he talked about like, when do you need the shortened thrust? And the answer is pretty much, actually, if you're shorter than your opponent, you're using a shortened thrust because and by shortened thrust, I mean like a thrust from like Ox, right? Where your arms aren't at full extension. You only like, Ox is pretty good if you're shorter than your opponent because it's giving you a little bit of cover so they can't just roll over you.
Yeah.
But even so, you have to be quite considerably shorter for not just standing tall for whatever your version of standing tall can be and extending into their targets. Like, if you can just do that, then you should be doing a direct thrust.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be doing the shortened thrust. So
Yeah.
it should really only be happening, like, maybe someone chuck an Oberhau at you.
Yeah.
Or actually worse, they chuck like a Scheitelhau, which is what most of you are doing when you're just full sending it from Vorschlag and hitting the top of the head.
Yeah.
Like when you're hitting that fully extended arm position on the cut.
Yeah.
That is really the tall guy game, is hitting that Scheitelhau. And or like that's sort of like the unapproachable longsword problem of height.
Yeah.
And the way that you approach it basically is that you need to do the shortened thrust.
Yeah.
And Fabris actually has the answers there, which is, and Martin sort of had exactly the same answer as Fabris, which is that, okay, you're coming up into this position, but actually you're thrusting over first and you're shortening the position as you come in.
Yeah.
But there's never any delay on the point crossing distance.
Yeah. It's always, it's basically you've thrust, and because it's faster than any fucking nonsense, you can then cover yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And it might be that you're covering yourself before your thrust is landing.
Yeah.
Because it's necessary, because their attack is coming in from so high and it's
Yeah.
just clearing your sword.
Yeah.
And that's okay, but that's like the one use case where you want to use a shortened thrust, and most of the time just going along the straight line is the thing. Have you got the Cap Ferrer quote here?
So there's this really cool Cap quote where he's like, even without finding the sword, I've just paraphrased him. Even without finding the sword or gaining the sword, the action is sufficient to seek the tempo and then just strike him depending on the placement of their sword. Although in common practice they teach to gain the opponent's sword in different lines, in brackets, for no reason whatsoever. He's so sassy.